Did you know that in medieval Japan there were no rules in battles? Any means of victory was acceptable as long as you didn't lose. And they really meant it. Samurai would cut off their enemy's head, impale them on a pike, or even throw them into a volcano just to win. So today let's find out, how did samurai win battles on the battlefield? First things first, when we imagine samurai battles, we usually picture two warriors fighting on a small clearing, but that was a very rare occurrence. In reality, most battles involved hundreds or even thousands of samurai. Not to mention the peasants with bows and arrows that usually supported their armies. Thus, battles weren't fought on clearings, but rather on hillsides, forests, or even inside of caves. The terrain was important because the battle was always happening on at least two levels, like a chess match. For example, if one warrior would climb up on a hill, he would have a much easier time shooting an arrow at his enemies than if he were in a valley. Or if a group of samurai would enter a cave, they would need to watch out for a surprise attack from behind. So yeah, terrain was important and smart commanders knew that. Next, we have to talk about formations. When samurai went into battle, they did so in a group. And these groups were led by experienced commanders who knew the terrain and battle tactics. That being said, the most common type of battle formation was called the wheel formation. This formation was used by both the samurai and their peasant army. It consisted of several concentric circles of troops. The innermost circle was composed of elite samurai whose job it was to protect the general. Each successive circle contained less experienced samurai, and the outermost circle was made up of peasants armed with bows and arrows. In the event of an enemy charge, the outer circles would let the inner circles pass through them and continue their advance. This way, every circle would be fighting on the edge of its formation, maximizing the number of swords and bows being used. As you can imagine, such a formation was nearly impenetrable, and it was also very flexible. Depending on the situation, different numbers of troops could be deployed. But the basic structure remained the same, and this type of battle formation was used all throughout medieval Japan, during the 1400s, 1500s, and even 1600s. Now, if the wheel formation was so effective, then why do we have images and stories of samurai fighting in open fields? Well, that was more likely the case when two rival samurai were meeting each other for a duel. You see, back in those days, there was no such thing as national armies. Samurai were hired by the local lords to fight their battles. So if two lords were at war, their samurai would meet on the battlefield, usually on a small clearing, to have a little duel and show off their skills. But once one of them lost, whether by death or surrender, the battle was over. They would part ways and go home. That's why we have those epic stories and pictures of duels between samurai. Because that was the only way that two of them could fight each other one-on-one. Other than that, battles were fought with formations, tactics, and strategy, just like any other war. Lastly, we have to talk about what happened after the battle. If the samurai was lucky, he would return home with many trophies, like the head of his enemy, for example. But he wasn't allowed to simply walk around the village with his prize. He had to bring it to the local lord, who would then give him something in return, usually gold or silver. Then the samurai would take that money to the nearest temple and exchange it for a beautiful lacquered box, which he would then take home and give to his wife. Why? Because that was a sign of his wealth and status. And believe it or not, the fancier the box, the higher the value of the trophy. So that's pretty much how samurai won battles, on the surface. It may seem like they just ran around the battlefield screaming and slashing with their swords. But there was a lot more to it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.